My name is Arun Fryer, and I'm really proud to present Prem Gill, the CEO of Creative BC. We have a lot of exciting things to be talking about. I do want to, first of all, just acknowledge where we are as we're doing this. We are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish Squamish peoples, the Stolo and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and the Musqueam Nation. So it's an honor and a privilege to be here and to have this chat with Prem. We're going to be talking about some great topics such as the new Creative Pathways program, a massive cultural shift in Canada, and overall the importance of just understanding BC's creative ecosystem. So again, my name is Arun Fryer. I'm a producing instructor at Vancouver Film School, and it's such an honor to introduce Prem Gill, CEO of Creative BC.
Thank you, Arun, and hi, everybody. Thanks for taking time at the end of your day to join the conversation, and thank you to Max and everyone at the Vancouver Film School for inviting me. I've met many of your faculty and students over the years. You're everywhere in the industry, both in physical production, animation, visual effects, in education, all over. So, you know, you have a strong footprint as a school, and your alumni are all over the place. I thought I'd tell you a little bit about Creative BC if you're not familiar with our organization. We are a nonprofit society. However, we do receive funding from the province to support the economic development of BC's creative industries. And what that means is we run a variety of programs and that support what we call the motion picture industry. So that is film, television, visual effects, animation, VR, as well as digital interactive media, which includes the video game sector, books, magazines, and the music sector as well. So we have a variety of programs across all of those. And in addition to that, we're also the film commission for the province. So any of you students who are in production and are making short films or working on projects, our film commission services are actually available to anybody, not just large Hollywood or Canadian producers, but really anybody, including student films, can access our services. It's a pre-service that we offer. And we also administer the province's tax credit programs. And these are a large part of the ecosystem of how the film and television industry really grew here in BC that I'm sure we'll be talking and touching on a little bit. And we run a variety of grant programs. And again, many of you may have been already involved in projects that are either have received development funding or different types of supports from Creative BC. We also support things like Crazy Eights. Maybe some students or people were participating in that event this past weekend. So you often see us supporting a lot of things in and around town and across the province. So that is a very quick intro to Creative BC. I've been here almost 6 years. Most of my background has been in film or in television and broadcasting, but I did spend, prior to this role, I was at TELUS, and I was there as part of the launch team that created Story Hive, that again, many of the folks in some of your programs have probably participated in or are looking to participate in. So really proud of how that's really grown and supported the ecosystem here in the province.
Wow, you guys cover a lot. It's amazing how many fingers in the pies you guys have at Creative BC. Every time I go on your website, it seems to be getting bigger and better as the industry is growing. It's incredible to see. I guess I'm just curious as to sort of the current state of where we're at, especially coming out of the last couple of years of COVID craziness. How are we doing overall? I mean, we're doing okay, but how is it from your end?
Well, that is I was trying to answer a question and then I dismissed it by accident. I didn't need to do that. So let me just type it in, just putting up the Creative BC website. There you go. So how is the industry doing? Well, I mean, I think it is doing extremely well, considering all of the unusual circumstances we've all lived through the last 2.5 years. Obviously, when COVID started, there's maybe many students who were in school or started with the Vancouver Film School while we were in COVID. So maybe you started school online. But basically, March, whatever that date was, March 9th or 10th, everybody, the industry, as so many sectors, Everybody went home. Production literally stopped. The visual effects, animation, and digital studios sent everybody home. And that was a particular sector that dealt with such high security IP that had never really had a work at home sector or culture rather. And they really quickly mobilized to ensure that they had things in place for people to be able to continue working. So in some sense, we always say like the shutdown was quote unquote the easy part, in the sense that you just had to like lock the doors and go home and hope for the best. And then it was, how do we get everybody safely back to work? And that took a gargantuan effort, and really was a great example of how the industry here in BC, and especially if you're new and looking to enter it, it was really a collaboration with Creative BC, with WorkSafe BC, with the government, with the Ministry of Health, with the labor unions, with the Producers Association, with the employers, and everybody came in to really develop these COVID protocols, which to some extent still exist in many of the studios and productions. But what we saw was that probably by late summer 2020, like July, August, we started to see productions coming back. And really by the end of that year, it was really almost a 6 to 12 month, closure for most physical production. But then it came back. And as we all know, I don't know what everybody else's viewing habits are like, or when you get that weekly screen report from, your Apple device that tells you how much screen time you've had. I think we all know the consumption of content and information and entertainment really, increased as we all spent more time at home and less time, going to events and all of those kinds of things. So we have seen, strong, last year was a very strong year. Let me look at my notes because I actually have the numbers for you. The total production we estimated in 2021 was 440 productions. Those are very strong and high numbers. If you go back even 10 years ago, it's more than double, I think.
Wow.
We have the same sort of percentages in terms of foreign service productions. So that's what we call the Hollywood productions and the shows that work out of BC versus the independent productions, which we're always, loving when we see a lot of our independent producers and Canadian producers even working on, whether it's large format US shows. We still see that sort of percentage in terms of there's still more foreign production here than domestic. But we do believe we're still North America's third largest production hub after New York and Los Angeles. And, these are, I guess, a testament to, we have a strong labor force, we have the infrastructure here, we have very competitive tax incentive programs, and we are known jurisdiction for delivering. So I think that was a very long answer-ish, Arun, but, I would say that the industry is, continued to grow and thrive. Not to say that COVID isn't continuing to be, from what I hear, like everybody knows productions that have had to close down for a few days, or offices because of employees having COVID or key personnel or something. And this is just going to be part of our lives. And I think we're all kind of adapting to it now, for better or for worse, but this is our reality. So yeah, and even in visual effects and animation, we saw new companies come here and open up offices. We saw expansion, and we continue to see that growth. And that is also becoming more globally competitive, with Montreal becoming a stronger base, jurisdictions like Australia. But BC still has a lot of advantages.
Yeah, you mentioned something interesting, that we're largely known as more of a service production industry here. But it seems to me, from my vantage point, just in terms of some of the recent grants you've been offering, such as the development grant for documentaries or the Motion Picture Fund, has this been a deliberate effort then on Creative BC to sort of develop and foster more homegrown talent?
Yeah, absolutely, it has. In partnership with the local member associations here, in understanding what the needs are. It's what's been really interesting, certainly from what I see. There's a lot of fluidity sometimes between, we have the production sector as a whole, but there's often people that will go work on a large Netflix or Warner Brothers show, but they're still developing their side projects on the side, or those same production companies. There's a production company in BC, if you don't know them, called Brightlight. They produce The Good Doctor. They've done some Netflix productions, but they also work on what we call their own intellectual property, their own IP. And really, I think we see more and more of this. It just depends on the size and scale of a company or organization. But yeah, absolutely. We think there's great storytellers and people here on the creative side who have a lot to contribute. We also have seen a lot of other creative positions within productions, not just the below the line, but where there's more and more, Canadians or people from BC who are taking on those roles. And that's part of it. That's part of strengthening the whole, the whole ecosystem is kind of, this is a one-stop shop, right? You can find your writer here, your director, your actors, as well as your set decorators, and that's sort of the ideal state that we're hoping we can continue to build towards.
Well, I do want to, I'll be completely transparent with our audience. I have been on the receiving end of a couple of Creative BC grants, and I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of other filmmakers. I've mentioned this to some other friends, and they all wanted to say thank you for supporting us. It does, it makes a huge difference to all of the artists and all of the producers and everybody out there just trying to make their own projects. Because I was talking to an American producer a couple of days ago at Doxa, and he was marveling at all the amount of tremendous support we have here in BC and Canada. And he said, make sure you recognize how lucky we are and how fortunate we are. So thank you very much for what you guys are doing.
Yeah, we really are. When you talk to colleagues and people in the US in particular, these types of government supports are unusual.
One of the most common questions that I get, especially at Vancouver Film School, is there any type of funding specifically for short films? Because that's often how filmmakers often cut their teeth and really begin to develop themselves. And unfortunately, we lost the Harold Greenberg Fund a couple of years ago. It was a major support. Is there anything on the agenda or anything that I could
yeah, well, we used to work with Greenberg and support we had a special program with them supporting BC shorts. Yeah, I agree with you. I think shorts and web series still play an important part in that kind of what we used to call back in my day the calling card, for a filmmaker and people developing. A lot of our support right now is through other programs like the Crazy Eights, which supports short film program. So we fund them to be able to do that. We are a partner with Story Hive, which has been a big part of what has really driven a lot of that shorter form content. And really, our development funds are focused on longer form, and we have a new production fund that we launched about a year ago. And I saw a question that was asking about equity streams, and within those we do have equity streams. We have recently, we're very fortunate to receive some funding support from the Rogers Fund, and through that we will be developing programs specifically for Indigenous creatives. And that can go everywhere from, so we don't know, maybe that will include short films. At this point, it's all still going through community consultations. And the person leading that on our team, her name is Luann Neal. So you'll start to see her out and about a little bit more talking about these things. But yeah, I think, there's through a lot of the other programs that we fund, hopefully we'll see some more shorts coming out of that. And I think I couldn't make it to the Crazy Eights event on Saturday, but I heard it was as amazing as it always has been. And it's played such a big role, I think, in the BC industry. Like I remember being on a jury, 20 years ago for them. So that's how far back it goes.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning Story Hive. I wanted to mention they are currently, they have their submissions open now, I believe, for another round of documentary films that I think they're looking for 20 or 40 projects, quite a number of projects. And I know you guys have always had a big hand in helping launch that. And it's been great watching a lot of filmmakers come through that program.
Yeah.
You also mentioned earlier the importance of tax credits, which is often one of the no more trickier things for, I guess, new filmmakers just to wrap their
Mhm.
minds around, or tax incentives, I should say, how
Mhm.
these things work and how important they are to our industry. I'm just wondering if
Mhm.
you could just give us a bit of a broad overview of how they.
Yeah, well, amazing team of people who can explain
Mm,
tax credit incentives in detail. And that might be something you want to do with production students at some point. But if you're a producer in Canada or really anywhere in the world, financing for a film or television project comes together in multiple ways. And one of those ways is usually leveraging tax incentive programs. And many provinces in BC, Ontario, Quebec, and BC, and in Canada, Ontario, Quebec, and BC are probably have some of the more consistent programs. But some of the states have them, as do many countries. The UK, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. There's these programs all over the world, and our programs in BC are very specifically focused on. So essentially, how it works is when you file your CRA claim, you would get a percentage back for X dollars spent on a production. And in BC, those are dollars spent on employing people in BC in qualifying roles. And that is a very high level, but I think the point in trying to learn and understand these programs, there's a lot of information on our website, but just in general, there's also, there's federal programs, is that it becomes an important part of your financing plan. So as you are getting out there and graduating and starting to, if you are, wanting to be a professional producer, it's going to be really essential from a business affairs hat that you really get to know these programs. And that's really the global system, honestly, on how things, and all the large scale productions to the smaller ones, everybody leverages these programs to get their content made. If you are a Marvel fan or Disney or other Disney content, stay through to the credits. You will see the Creative BC logo, because almost every high-end visual effects, from Mandalorian, Spider-Man, anything, there's some artist in BC that has played a role in some work on that, and something for us to really be proud of as a jurisdiction. It's a big deal. It literally is, thousands of jobs.
Yeah, I've read that Vancouver in particular is one of the world hubs for digital effects. Has that been a deliberate strategy in order to attract these companies to come here?
Yeah, well, that's part of, incentive programs are really help companies build footprints. So, it started many years ago, companies that have been in BC for a long time, like Rainmaker and Mainframe, to Sony ImageWorks, which I think landed in BC shortly after the Olympic Games way back when, Industrial Light and Magic, Double Negative, every major visual effects and animation company has a footprint in BC. And I think really the incentives, but also the talent. If you don't have people, and we need more people. Like that, this is the reality, is like there is a global shortage for this type of talent. And, we want that talent to be here and to grow here. And there's a lot of students, I think, that come out of your programs and end up working for many of these companies, or, local companies like Atomic Cartoons and Wild Brain, and they develop people too. So I think that's really important, is that when you join these companies, you're often going to work with all kinds of, talent there that invests in helping you continue to develop your skills.
That's great. Thank you for that, by the way. You mentioned earlier about the equity funding. I'm just coming back to this question here in the Q&A. Is there any funding available for women of color looking for a film grant for a feature project they're currently working on? And thank you, Regina, for that question. Was that what you were referring to earlier?
Yeah, so we do have equity streams within these programs. We don't have anything specific targeting women of color. However, there's some very specific, what we call underrepresented people programs. And Regina, if you start digging through our website, you'll find the people who are responsible for those programs that we can connect you with to talk through what they look like. In general, there's never enough, there's more demand than there is funding, as anybody who's ever applied for a grant knows, or administered grant programs. However, I also always encourage people to, if you didn't get a grant, see who on the lists are always made public, who did, call them, offer to work on their project. You just never know, right? Because I think everybody, we're in the system of where, you support people, they will support you when your time comes as well.
I'm glad you're supporting people to just continue to work on their grants and continue to follow up with other people. As somebody who had many grants rejected, but then started to get some acceptance, it does take a while. And I found the more you do it, the easier and the better that it gets. So for those of you that are looking to submit some grants, keep at it. It takes a while to really get it right. But once you start getting it, it makes it that much sweeter for sure. And that sort of leads me into another line of questioning here, because I loved Regina's question asking about equity funding for women of color, because it does seem like there's a bit of a cultural shift happening in the creative industry. We're starting to see a lot more BIPOC and women all coming up in the industry and being supported by organizations such as Creative BC. Have you noticed that yourself as well? A bit of a cultural shift?
Yeah, well, look, I've been working on this cultural shift my entire career. And, in 2004 or 5, I ran a short film program at City TV when it launched in Vancouver that was specifically targeted to what we then called visual minorities. So, I think it's not been fast enough. I think there is a lot. What I think the shift has been is in a larger commitment across the board from all kinds of organizations and meaningful commitment. So, really, I always like to say moving from the performative to the actions that will ultimately transform things. And this is a long game. Things are not going to happen overnight. And we need everybody to be a part of it. And yes, we're definitely starting to see, we have an Indigenous screen office in Canada that emerged prior to COVID. Or not emerged, it was established, and they have a staff person in BC who's based on Vancouver Island. We have an Indigenous fund. We got $1 million from a private company to build an Indigenous fund. That's a pretty big deal. There's a Black Screen office in Canada. There's the Racial Equity Media Collective. There's a lot of research and work being done as well, and people trying to understand, part of it is understanding how, systemic barriers didn't happen overnight, and nor will they be restructured or dismantled overnight. So there's, and I know we'll get to it, and our project Creative Pathways, which I'll speak to, is also a big part of this. In how do we have to look at, it's a multifaceted approach, multi-pronged. It's not just going to be one thing, but multiple things that have to happen at the same time, and also at the leadership level, right? I am still often in many meetings that are national meetings where I am often the only, person of color, so definitely the only woman of color. We have a lot of women in the industry, which is fantastic. And, from broadcasters to people who run organizations like ours across the country. But, we still have a lot of, there's a lot of change to come still, I think. And, I think I'll just sort of reinforce that I see broad commitment. And now it's about how we come together to continue to roll out actions that support shifts.
Oh, it's great to see, actually. And I've noticed even on grant applications, even just the wording of trying to make sure we're filtering out and making sure that the people that really need the support are getting that support as well. It's been really nice to see. And you mentioned Creative Pathways, and I think that ties into another question that we have, Roland, that says, my question is how easy or difficult it is to get into the creative industries in Canada, especially for people who want to migrate and work in Canada. And I think maybe that could be a sort of segue into this new portal that you guys have offered at Creative.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know you have a lot of international students at Vancouver School.
Yes.
I'm sure that you work very closely with immigration authorities on flexibility as the years go on. We need more people in Canada, period. Like, we all hear about the job, the talent shortages. I have friends who own restaurants who can't open enough days anymore because they don't have enough staff. So there's all kinds of means in Canada, and I'm not an immigration policy expert, so I shouldn't speak too much on that. But a couple of months ago, we launched a website called Creative Pathways, and it's really, our goal is to develop a really localized, comprehensive hub that can help career seekers looking to get into the film, the motion picture industry, and really, and with an equity lens. And I always encourage people to really start to develop an understanding of inclusivity, equity, and equality. These are all very distinct and important things. And the focus of Creative Pathways, it's really for anybody I don't know, we get a lot of calls for saying, I want to work in the film industry. And this is, one tool to help people to start to understand, how does it work? How does the industry work? What are the different types of jobs? How do I get into a union? What courses do I need to do something? So it's really a knowledge-based hub that can help with that. But also, as the months and weeks go on, there will be more opportunities in the opportunity section that will be showcased about actual, paid opportunities for people, specifically with that equity lens, whether it's through a production or a special program. And that will all be coming soon. So I encourage people to subscribe to the newsletters or come back and check or follow, us on LinkedIn and Twitter and all of those things to keep track. But I think it's one of nothing else exists like this as far as we know in Canada. So again, it's not geo-blocked, so anybody can look at it from anywhere. And it's trying to demystify it, right? Because I think there is a lot of people, certainly of my generation, who entered the industry and work in those below the line jobs, particularly in film and television. Many people have stories, not everybody, but many people have stories where they are now a third generation of a film family. One of their parents was in set deck, so they ended up in set decoration, or their neighbor was like, we need construction people. And we're desperate, so they were able to get employed. So there's a lot of it was all kind of happening behind the scenes a little bit, and that's really one of the goals of Creative Pathways, is to help people start to understand that your dream is to be a director and be like Ava DuVernay or Spike Lee someday, and you will be, but there's a lot of other jobs in the meantime, and there's a lot of need and a lot of areas people never would have thought about. I always like to say the film industry, production industry, is like a subset of every job that exists in society, right? We've got chefs, we have carpenters, we have electricians, we have makeup artists, we have costume makers, lighting experts. It's really quite something that, any job that exists out there in the world probably has some equivalent on a film set.
Mm-hmm. And we're still seeing those jobs increase more and more. Based on the numbers that I've been reading, it just seems like the whole entertainment and film and video games and all the rest, it's all just, these graphs just continue to go up all the time. And here in BC especially, it does seem like it's a growing part. I've talked to a number of producers, and they can't find enough people to work on their shows. It's really hard to find labor.
It is. So that was part of this, is trying to, work again. Creative BC is neither the employer nor the labor organization or the studio, but we're here to be that catalyst in helping build this as a bridge and as something that can, benefit the whole. And that's really, what we hope it'll build into.
I did post a link to Creative Pathways in the chat there. So for those of you that want more information, please check that out after our chat, of course. But there's a lot of great information on there. And as Prem mentioned, there's a newsletter for Creative Pathways.
Yes, and I think you can just go to the site and it'll tell you how to subscribe.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for making that. I know I signed up for that right away, and it's been great having that sort of resource available, especially for new students coming out of Vancouver Film School. And I see that's one of our new questions here. I think the challenges, and after graduating from a school like this, where should they be going, and how is the best pathway forward? And I think a platform like this has certainly helped provide some guidance in terms of a direction of where to go once you do graduate.
Yeah. Well, there's many directions. I don't know if that was a question for me, Arun, or not,
Oh,
but
sure.
um,
Just monitoring the
y-
questions here as well.
yeah, I'm just reading, I think Sahil's question
Yeah.
here, the challenges expected after the course. I, I think part of, I have a couple of things on this where, we want to welcome people who, or help people understand the pathways and the links into entering the industry. But also we know there has to be a culture shift, and in some cases, things people had never thought about around inclusivity and equity and diversity. And that all has to happen in tandem for people to have a really successful or positive experience in wanting to continue to work in this industry. So if you start digging through creative pathways, one of the tools in there is something called a creative equity roadmap that is really for individuals, for organizations, for companies, for anybody who's like, there's a lot of conversation around diversity and equity, and I don't know where to begin, or I don't know how to have these conversations. And it's basically, it has a lot of tools and links in there to start to work it through for yourself, and do some of your own work if you're interested. But I do think that there has to be a lot of willingness on everybody's part to who is participating in something to ensure that for a newcomer who may be a newcomer to Canada and to the industry, that we're taking all of that into account, that this is not a monoculture, and who wants that anyways. So I think there will always be challenges, I think, because it's a job, and there's good days and bad days. But again, we're really hoping that people will utilize the creative pathways tools to really help them in trying to shift some of those challenges.
Oh, great. Well, I'm excited to watch this platform grow. And for those of you looking to sign up, please sign up for that newsletter. Please check out that website, creativepathwayscanada.com. Now, is this meant to be across Canada, or is this more BC focused?
Well, at this point, it's BC focused because we are Creative BC, and we certainly talk to our colleagues across the country all the time. And you never know, I would say. Again, while the opportunities at this point will be BC focused for BC people, it doesn't mean that the other information there is available to anybody wherever they are.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for providing that opportunity. And speaking of which, another question here: do you set up any sort of networking events? I mean, it seems like this creative pathway is a great way for people to network online, but also
No,
other events.
that's a great question. If you keep an eye on opportunities, we're doing things that we're calling Greet 10s and Meet 10s. So yeah, the networking question is a great one, because when I was referring earlier to the people who, had a neighbor and then ended up in the industry, a network is really important. And especially in an industry where people move from project to project, they tend to move with their network, or they hear from their network where there's availability. So through actually very structured things that we're going to do through Creative Pathways, one of them is called Meet 10, where we will basically start to set up communities of people. So if you are interested in set deck, we may have a set deck person lead that group, and they will meet with the same 10 people, and they'll the idea is to have some structured networking. So yeah, absolutely. In addition to I guess maybe there'll be new in-person things that are happening. I think Crazy Eights was one of those where if you are again, I think whether Story House having events or Crazy Eights or the Doxa screenings that are happening, they really are, if you can stick around for the socializing aspects of it, you really do connect and meet with people in the industry. I think the whole festival type of circuit in the world, really around filmmaking, is largely about continuing to build your networks around the world. And there's a network that you're going to school with. I mean, you're meeting people from all over the world. I think that's quite amazing.
Yeah, I know. Speaking for myself, I was a film school student many years ago, and I'm still making movies with some of my classmates with a dozen years later. because you get to be so tight, and you get they're part of my network, and I work on their movies and they work on my movies, and that's really how the industry works. And that's how it's really always worked. But it's great that you guys are providing some formal, really structured meetings and really niche, which I think is fantastic. And that way, for all of you looking for networking opportunities, please sign up to these, because this is a very unique opportunity that doesn't happen in a lot of other places. I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, because I wanted to talk on something very dear to my heart, and I know it's important to you as well, just in terms of the issue of sustainability and the creative industries. And I know BC has been a real leader in promoting sustainability and green film sets. And I know there's even a big meeting coming up with Real Green as well. I'm just wondering if you could provide just a bit of a snapshot of where you see it, sort of where we're at and where we're going for sustainability.
I would love to talk about it. So Real Green is an initiative that was actually started within Creative BC going back to the we call it the aughts, like 2006, 2007. And really picked up steam about 3-4 years ago again. And this is about sustainability, the physical production industries in particular role in sustainability, and being part of the solution and not the problem. And if you've ever been on a film set, there is a lot of waste, there is a lot of people, there's a lot of energy involved, and thank you for posting the link, Arun. And so Real Green, we actually have a person here on our team now. Her name is Smiley Karana, and Smiley is our Real Green lead. And that's how committed we are in supporting the industry in this. It's actually an industry supported initiative. So it's funding from companies, from membership organizations that have allowed us to build out Real Green. And there's a variety of things. So it's everything from, we're launching a carbon calculator where productions can actually figure out what their carbon footprint is, and using that as a tool to understand what you can change next time. So it's everything from changing moving to LED light bulbs, to maybe only having electric cars, to not having executives flying in, maybe they just do Zoom meetings, cutting anywhere you can, and what that contribution looks like. The other interesting thing that we have here in BC is that in Metro Vancouver, is something called the Sustainable Lockup, where productions can donate, what are they called?
The flats?
The flats, donate flats, anything, set decorating items, all kinds of tools from a production that's completed. And you, as filmmakers, can go there. And if there's something you need, I've heard of, many small productions who've been able to get their hands on flats and literally save themselves hundreds of dollars by repurposing stuff. So it's the repurposing stuff. There was a time when all that stuff would have gone into the landfill. There is also, we're fortunate here where we live that there are waste facilities where you can send, white styrofoam. We have soft plastics. I think as a jurisdiction, we're very fortunate that we have, governments that have supported those types of initiatives. And you can also, sometimes we have courses. You can attend a Real Green course. They're free. And maybe some of your students have participated in those. We're having what Arun was referring to. I think it's going to be on Zoom, a Real Green general meeting coming up. And also we led this initiative within BC where we partnered with BAFTA, the British Film Association, and we licensed their carbon calculator for Canada. And after we did it, CBC sub-licensed it from us. Ontario and Quebec have. So we're really proud that BC really led the way, the BC industry for Canada, really, in driving this forward. And even one more thing, like things that you don't think about, there's, again, on the food waste side, there's a lot of catering, there would be a lot of leftover catering, and it used to, again, because of food safe rules, you couldn't just go drop it off at a shelter or a food bank or somewhere. So they developed, a lot of productions had special refrigeration and special where, an organization could come and pick up the food and it would still be food safe. Now, after everybody came back from the COVID lockdown initially, obviously there was more packaging, right? There was more water bottles. So I think there's been a bit of a readjustment that everybody's like, okay, how do we do that in a sustainable way? Because now meals were individually packaged. You couldn't bring your own water bottle anymore. It was all kinds of different things happening. All the masks we're all wearing that, are also contributing to the landfills and have to be disposed in a certain way. So anyways, it is obviously a growing thing, an ongoing commitment. We're very also fortunate that we have the city of Vancouver many years ago started developing what they call power drops across the city, so that you didn't have to bring in a generator. You could plug into electricity. Like the Vancouver Art Gallery is one of those. Have you ever seen a large event down there, even a production? There's less generator noise, diesel, gas. So anyways, we can go on and on about this, but I think the next, this generation of your students who are going out there, I'm sure they've already got this lens on. And we're here to make sure that the tools are there for them to do what they already know. I think this is the most versed generation probably in sustainability in our lives.
Mm-hmm. No, it's great to see so much focus going on this very important issue. And the film industry is no different. And as you mentioned, for years and years, we unfortunately were fairly wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to see so much attention going towards the opposite end of the spectrum now, which I think is great. And one of the most common misconceptions I find is that going green or being sustainable is more expensive. But that hasn't always, I don't necessarily agree with that. Have you encountered anything in terms of the actual costs?
I mean, certainly we've heard similar things. I guess I think of it personally as, I think the long-term expense is worth the short-term expense.
Yeah.
And even like there's a lot of car rentals, right? Vehicle rentals. So, the rental companies had to switch over, or in the process of switching over to electric vehicles. So it wasn't that easy. Even if you wanted to rent an electric vehicle, it's not that easy to do at this point. But, companies like Driving Force, who supply a lot of trucks and things for the industry, I think they were starting to look at more EVs. But yeah, that comes at a cost, right? And but I haven't been, because of COVID, on a set in a long, long time. But I think most places have many things, we do at our office here. We have, we have recycling from ballpoint pens to
nice.
cables and wires and all these kinds of things that are part of the company. We have a contract with the same company that supports film test sets. It's called Keeping It Green.
Yeah.
So anyways, there's a lot of good resources. So do check out, check out the meeting. It's open to everybody if you want to learn more.
Yeah, and I think it's great. There's so many opportunities that Creative BC is providing, such as sustainable lockup and Keeping It Green. They're all wonderful initiatives. And I have said to other producers that have argued, well, it's too expensive to be green. My argument is, well, somehow we found a lot of money to make COVID work by paying for all these extra expenses. Budgets went up around 20 to 25% for COVID costs. Surely we can find a little extra money for sustainability. Or maybe we can, as COVID's declining a little bit, maybe we can divert some of those resources from COVID into sustainability. Because clearly, I think the money is there. We just gotta make it happen now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there's another question here, just in terms of Creative BC supporting music and film. But film scoring in particular, is that something that Creative BC also supports as well?
Yeah, so we don't specifically have any programs that support the development of film scores. However, we support a program through the Vancouver Film Festival called VIF Amped that took place, I think, the last 2, maybe 3 years. I think they'll be doing it again this year, which is really about that, bringing together the music industry and the film industry, music supervisors who often license music, composers on how to connect with, the companies and people through our music programs. Again, there's a variety of initiatives. There's actually so many, I can't remember, but there are, somebody told me a story just yesterday about a composer who started out working in sound and kind of worked their way. I'm not telling the story correctly, but it was a local person. There have been some local people, and there was many years ago now, I remember the Vancouver Post Alliance held an event which was very specifically on this purpose. So there's a lot of more educational stuff happening out there. But do we have a specific grant program on this? No, but there's a lot on the periphery that's being supported.
I've attended a couple of those AMP gatherings, by the way, at VIF, and they're fantastic. I posted a link in the chat, or the chat, if anybody does want to check that out. I forgot to ask one thing on sustainability. Has there ever been any talk of ever adding an extra point or two on a tax credit if you can have a green or sustainable production? Has that ever been discussed?
I think there's been industry advocates who have advocated for something like that. I think tax credit legislation can be very complicated.
Yeah, of course.
And you can never say no that these types of incentives can or don't work. But I think at this point, one of the things that that has been talked about that they do in the UK is kind of like a green seal that a production gets. I don't know exactly. I think it works through the carbon calculator somehow. So there may be other things that can emerge. You'll also see a lot of productions. Again, I watch the credits on things because, and I know, sometimes on Netflix and things, it kind of doesn't have credits. It just sort of works its way through. But, on any HBO show, they'll often say, this was made through HBO Green so I think there's a lot of, industry self stuff happening, which I think is what you always want rather than having government intervention in things sometimes.
No, for sure. Another great question here in the chat. Are there any programs that support the creation of music videos? Because that's often a common one for people.
There have been we also fund programs through Music BC, which is the industry association. But there have been music video funds through the music program. So our music program is called Amplify. Amplify BC. Again, we've got a very robust section on our website for Amplify, and there have been funds for that. And I'm not going to try to describe exactly how those programs work because there's some very smart program officers we have who do that.
Yeah. I guess a broader question, just for the overall shape of the creative industries in BC, where do you see us then in the next, I'd say, 3 to 5 years? What are sort of the bigger trends and patterns we should be looking out for?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball because, 2.5 years ago, I never would have said a global pandemic was going to, I actually very distinctly remember in, end of February, early March, where you're like, they'll never do that. Shut everything down. So I don't know if I'm a good predictor of things, but I think, the creative industries, the creative sector in BC is a strong part of the economy of this province. It is part of the, we remain strong in resources, in tech. And I think the creative industries, and we like to talk about visual effects, animation, video games as creative tech is a critical part of that. There's 40 to 60,000 people at any given time employed. So that's a lot of people, in a province of our size. So, I think we will see continued development and growth. I think that it is all going to be about the talent. We need the people. We need, people, entering the industry, staying in the industry, developing and growing and thriving within the industries, and, continue to, get all the product that's created by people here or for people here all around the world. And, I think that's the strongest crystal ball I have right now, is that I know we have the commitment and the passion and the infrastructure here to be able to, become even stronger. And then there'll be circumstances that none of us ever expected, but both good and bad, hopefully, right?
Yeah, no, you just never know what's going to be around the corner, I guess, these days. I did forget to mention earlier when we were talking about tax credits, I do want to say I personally have reached out to Creative BC on several occasions throughout the years and asked The people that work there, sometimes very simple questions, sometimes
Mhm.
very complicated. And I will say it's always been absolutely wonderful chatting with anybody at Creative BC. They make it quite accessible, and they're really there to help especially first-time producers, independent producers in particular, that have a lot of questions. For those of you in our audience that are just new and are just starting out, please don't hesitate to reach out to contact
Mhm.
them. I hope I'm okay saying
No,
that.
you know what? It's best to ask questions than go spend a lot of time going down a path that you're not clear on.
Yeah, no, they've always provided excellent guidance. And I know that it does seem like every year there's always one or two tax credit workshops that seem to be held
Mhm.
in the city as well.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Keep an
I,
eye out for those.
yeah, those are always very well attended and always lots and lots
Yeah.
of great information.
Yeah.
And again, if anybody does have any other questions, please type them in the Q&A. I
Mhm.
think we've got to almost all of them so far, but if anybody does have any further
Yeah,
questions.
I would also mention, I think part of what we're lucky to have is a lot of industry associations here. So, the Canadian Media Producers Association, the CMPA has a BC branch. um, DigiBC, which is the Creative Tech Industry Member Association. You don't have to be a member always. They have a lot of events, especially these days, and these, on the online platforms. It's a great way to continue to develop your knowledge about what's happening here. So yeah, take advantage of that stuff. I think the VIF, there's a lot of stuff they repeat. So does the Whistler Film Festival, where they've done seminars or information sessions, and they're on their YouTube channels and places like that. So take advantage of all that stuff. It's out there. The information, it's easy to become overwhelmed too, though, because there is a lot. But it's also a good way to start to round out your knowledge and understanding of what's happening out there and what some of these other organizations can be there to support and help you in as you embark on your career.
No, I think that's great. And I think for those of you that are just starting out, please sign up to some of these new newsletters that we have mentioned, such as I know Creative BC, they put out a fantastic newsletter. The Creative Pathways, they have one as well. So if you are looking, well, where do I get the information from? These are some excellent portals for you all to take advantage of. And again, as I like to
Mhm.
pass along to my students, the film industry is not going to come to you. You need to go to it. So start getting out there and start. I'm so glad you mentioned the importance of just building a network, because that's going
Mhm.
to sustain you in the long run, is having a strong network of people and just getting out there, putting yourself out there, going to events like Creative BC and Doxa and VIF and all the other great organizations that are out there in the city and the province as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
Actually, and that leads me to another question. It does seem like there is a very strong focus sort of on Vancouver and the lower mainland,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
outside of the zone or the grid, is there any sort of special focus in terms of outside of the main lower
Yeah,
mainland?
I mean, again, kind of being in online platforms, we've been able to access a lot more people and events that we're having or seminars. Um, so I think there's always that. There's also, we support events all over the province. Hopefully we're going to see a lot of music festivals and things come back this summer. So if you are, in northern BC or the interior, you'll probably see Creative BC's logo on some poster somewhere. We also have 8 regional film commissioners across the province they're independent from Creative BC, but they do receive some funding support from us because obviously we're based in Metro Vancouver, but there's a film commissioner too on Vancouver Island, in the interior, in northern BC, Columbia Kootenay, and they're also great resources for people if you're trying to get a film made in Kamloops. The film commissioner in Kamloops in the Thompson-Nicola region there, they can really be very helpful in trying to help you understand what local crew availability there might be, or studio space, or something that can be used as a studio. So again, there's links to all those people through our website as well. And then obviously through COVID, there's just been a lot more companies who have decentralized. I think they probably have employees now who are maybe working out of Gibson's, but work for a company in downtown Vancouver and maybe come into town once or twice a week. So yeah, there's a lot of regional activity obviously the bulk of it really here where most of the people are, but also South Vancouver Island is really developing. It is, very, I would say, second to, Metro Vancouver. That Victoria region is becoming a pretty strong production hub. And also like production called When Calls the Heart, that's in sort of the Courtney Comox region. So there's a lot happening on Vancouver Island too. If you're on the island or you're from the island and you want to go back, there's a lot of work opportunities there too.
Oh, great. It's nice to see a lot of areas of focus outside of Vancouver because our province is big. There's a lot of opportunities out there. Another question from Kelly here. Just because I think this is a really important one. Support for writers. Just because that's where all these ideas start with, just on the page and developing our own original ideas here. What sort of support do you have?
Yeah, there's a program that we've supported called the Pacific Screenwriters Institute, and they have just gone through a cohort that went through the program. And they're, so I encourage you to check that out if you are an aspiring writer, but they also host other events as well. So development funding, even though it's the producer who applies for development funding, it's usually so they can hire a writer.
Yep.
So, again, get to know producers if you're a writer, because often they're the ones that access the funding programs. We ourselves are not a training organization or, we're here to provide the supports. But there is a lot of that stuff happening. We've even had events over the years where the Book Publishers Association and the Producers Association come together, because you just never know where ideas are going to come from. And we know that, book optioning is a big thing for producers as well. So yeah, figure out who's applying for development funding, or partner with a producer, or become a producer yourself, which is a lot of work. So I think that's the other thing, is sometimes people know that they're, it's still important, I think, to understand all aspects of the business, even if you're only doing one part of the business, but it's good to know as well.
I completely agree with you. It's a lot of work, but also it's a lot of fun at the same time. And it really is. It's a joy to be doing these things. I just out of curiosity, any sort of sneak peeks or exciting news or announcements for the next little while coming from?
Yeah, well, I had mentioned that we're in consultations right now on developing our Indigenous fund. So those programs hopefully will start to roll out kind of into the summertime. A bunch of grant programs have closed recently, so some announcements should be coming out on those. It is April 1st was the beginning of our fiscal year, so keep an eye out for new program announcements. And yeah, I'm excited to see the content that emerges that maybe was funded a few years ago, and if now is their time to get out there and get their project made.
Just out of curiosity, for those of you that are just starting out, is there a good time of year they should be aiming towards in terms of a lot of applying for these grants? Is it the winter or summer, or is there a specific time?
Yeah, I mean, usually our programs are, because our fiscal year ends March 31st, they're kind of generally grant deadlines. They are throughout the year, but probably between now and the fall is when most of them roll out. But again, if you're subscribing to the newsletters, you'll start to see that. And we also try to, if you follow us on any socials, promote other programs where there's not just funding through us, but other funding programs, that are available to people in BC.
That's great. I know one of the biggest questions I get from students is, well, where do I get the money to make my movies? And I said, well, I almost always say, well, at least start with Creative BC and at least poke around, see what sort of programs and funding that they have. Other opportunities like you mentioned before, like Story Hive or MPA or Crazy Eights. Yeah. There are lots of great opportunities out there.
Yeah, and really, learn business affairs and talk to business affairs people as well, because it is not going to be one source ever that is going to be the source of your funding. So it takes time, but you'll get there.
Well, thank you very much, Prem. I think we're just about at our time here. This has been absolutely illuminating. Just for me personally, it's always great to talk to somebody like yourself to provide just an excellent snapshot of where we're at, where we were and where we're going, most importantly, because it seems like the future is very bright for the creative industries.
Yeah, we have to be optimistic, right? And I think I appreciate everybody who took time to join us and listen today. And thank you again for your questions, Arun,
My
and
pleasure.
at VFS for
Yeah,
organizing.
thank you very much, everybody, to the audience. You have great questions.
Mhm.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. It's not raining yet, so maybe you can still get out there quickly.
Yeah,
And thank you very much, Prem. This has been absolutely delightful. And on behalf of the other filmmakers that I know that wanted to say thank you,
yeah,
and the Vancouver Film School in particular, thank you very much. It's been wonderful. So thanks again.
it's great. Have a
See
good
you.
evening, everybody. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.